Now we can do our mastering song by song by using this multi-project format. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you some of the benefits, and I'm going to start by turning off all of the mastering plugins on every single track, and thereby every single song. So we're going to be hearing each song in its raw format now. So I'm going to close the mixer window by typing F3 on my keyboard, and then I can go to my arrange window and I can listen to each one of these projects. And I'll mention that each one was recorded at a radically different time. In fact, most of these were recorded years apart from one another, so they're going to sound very different. And part of the trick of mastering is to make them all sound comparable. Since all of these songs are going to end up on the same CD, we want them to all not only have the same comparable volume, but we want them to all have the same comparable tonal quality. And now that we've got them all loaded together, all we need to do to hear the differences between the files are to select a point in time and press play. So let's start with the first project. Now that's a real drum set and not the Zen drum, and so that's probably going to sound quite a bit different than our Sack Lunch project, which is going to sound different from this file. Some of the volumes are radically different between one and the other. And the EQ is also different between each one because each one is a different song, so they don't all sound identical. So let's start mastering our first project. That's the Saturday Matinee song. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that mixdown file and type P on my keyboard, and that will place the left and right locators around it. And then I'm going to type H a few times on my computer keyboard so that it zooms in to that project. And then, on the left-hand side of the screen, on the Object Inspector, you'll notice that you can get to your inserts, and now we have access to all of our mastering plugins inside of the project window. So I'm going to enable all of our mastering plugins, and let's just use some presets to start to master this particular project. So I'm going to get it playing. I'm going to turn my sound card down a little tiny bit. And let's go to the multiband compressor and just call up some presets. That's awfully bright sounding. That's got some power. Let's just try that. That's a pretty loud mixdown to begin with. Let's get an idea of just how loud it is by going to the Scope tool. So I'm going to go back to the mixer, and I'm going to hit the Edit button on the Scope, and then I can close the mixer. And things look pretty loud right now. Let's listen to the EQ. I think it could be a little bit brighter. I'm not seeing a lot of high frequencies in my scope, so I'm going to go to my equalizer plugin, and let's start to turn up some of the high frequencies. Now I can start to hear those cymbals. That sounds pretty good. Let's take a look at our maximizer and see where it's set. Right now, it's at about 25%, and it's not working really hard. That feels pretty good, so let's pretend that we just mastered that project. Now let's work on the mastering of the next window, or of the next project, which is our Sack Lunch project, and I can get to it just by playing it. Wow. There's a big volume difference, isn't there? Since we've performed the mastering on this first song, we now need to worry about the next song's mastering. So I'm going to select that track, and I'm going to enable the plugins on that. And let's throw in some presets. Let's go to, I think we started with the Ballad Master 2. That sounds pretty good. A little bit worried that the hi-hats are too crispy. So let's bring down some of those high frequencies. But now there's still going to be a pretty radical volume difference between the first song on our CD and the second song. Well, that's the quiet part of the song. Hear that? So we know that we need to increase the average volume of our second track. So with the second track selected, I'm going to hit the Maximizer's Edit button and start to bring up the Optimize control. Now, as soon as I get that loud enough, I notice that I don't like what the multiband compressor is doing. I'm going to lower the threshold on that so it's not crushing it so much. Actually, the multiband compressor is hardly working at all, so let me lower the threshold on it so that it controls that low end a little bit. That's starting to sound a little bit better, but I don't like that it's going over 0. You do have to pay attention to the 0 control when you're working on mastering on a multi-project basis. Let's go back to the Maximizer. We might be able to turn this up a little bit louder now. Now, how's the volume holding up between those two tracks? Okay, well, I still don't feel like I can get that second track as loud as the first track. So if I can't turn up the Optimize control without it falling apart on the second track, I might need to lower it on the first track. So let's go back to the first track and look at its Maximizer setting. It's set at 25. I'm going to drop that down to 15, and then do a comparison of each track. Now that's starting to feel better. Now they're comparable volumes, even though there's quite a bit more musical energy in this track because it has a lot of distortion and a lot of big real drums, whereas this one has cleaner guitars, so it's stick, but you get the idea. We're just comparing the volume of each track and trying to get them comparable. So now I would go through the rest of those tracks and do the same sort of process on each one. I would do the mastering on each one and then compare that mastering to the other tracks on the CD to see if I'm really getting them to sound right. And what makes the multi-project format so powerful is that you can do so just by clicking a different point in time in the project, instead of having to load all 10 or 12 projects into Cubase and then turn them on and off to hear the differences on a project-by-project basis. Here we're doing it on a mixdown-by-mixdown basis, and we can instantly compare what the mastering of each individual song sounds like from one to the other. And now let's talk about feeling the transition time in between each of our songs.